Two Scala Ad Caelums? Nah, it's probably simpler than you think. Ahoy! I'm iAyeCaptainKai, and today I'll be explaining not only my theory for why Scala looks the way it did in ancient times, but also why the gazing eye doesn't seem to work in this era. Teased at the start of the Missing Link trailer, and then further solidified by the gazing eye appearing dim on the no-name Keyblade. First, for those who have no clue what I'm talking about, this, as you may know, is Scala Ad Caelum, and this is also Scala Ad Caelum. One appears bright and lively, while the other is especially grim. If these are indeed the same world, it would stand to reason that something drastic happened. And believe me, it did. Let's take it back a bit. What are the origins of this place? We've got some Union Cross mobile game spoilers inbound. And don't worry, for those of you that already know Union Cross, I'll leave timestamps so you can skip this portion. But I'll make this quick. Before Scala Ad Caelum was Daybreak Town. The Master of Masters put his eye in a Keyblade known as the No-Name Keyblade to see into the future and have it chronicled into the Book of Prophecies. It was foretold that a cataclysmic event would take place known as the Keyblade War, which would then summon Kingdom Hearts, scattering the United Worlds while darkness prevails and light expires. A small group of Keyblade wielders, however, found a way to avoid the war and time traveled into the future. All but one, that is, Ephemer, who stayed behind to rebuild from the wreckage. And this is where my theory kicks in. I think that Kingdom Hearts is drawing inspiration from its older brother, Final Fantasy, using a recurring theme known as World of Ruin, described as a world being thrown off balance into ruin. I'll provide details on how I came to this conclusion at the end of the video for those of you who care about Final Fantasy spoilers. But for now, there are two examples of this in Final Fantasy. I'll give you both, but to avoid spoiling either game, I'm only going to be describing what happens to the world and not providing a numbered title. In one example, the world is thrown off balance by releasing gods that were sealed away. This causes a cataclysm that rearranges the entire planet, much like how the worlds in Kingdom Hearts were once all connected and then scattered into space after Kingdom Hearts was summoned during the Keyblade War. The other example is in a world where darkness slowly spreads, extinguishing light to the point that stars have been engulfed, making days shorter until the sun no longer shines. That kind of paints the picture of darkness prevails and light expires, huh? In the case of Kingdom Hearts, what I'm getting at is yes, of course the world is left in ruin. That much is obvious. But why is this the unwritten era? Well, what does an eye need to be able to see? Exactly. Light. Gula begins collecting light for himself in hopes of summoning Kingdom Hearts and luring out the Master of Masters,
which will lead to the Keyblade War.
But the other Union leaders don't want this to happen, so to maintain balance, they follow suit and gather light as well.
Envy, what are you going to do? I'll gather Lux too. No matter what, the balance must be kept.
With the Keyblade War, though, came a huge decline in light, the light of people's heart being extinguished, as well as the light of all worlds being cast adrift, shining dimly in space. This is the era Kairi's grandmother had mentioned in Kingdom Hearts 1 Final Mix, mentioning fragments of light that survived and rebuilt the world swallowed in darkness. It would stand to reason that, with such little light, the eye is having difficulties serving its function of observing. But how would Scala go from ruin to balance within the span of 14 or so years? We see baby Xehanort retrieved from a young woman, only to be returned to Scala as a teenager once the world is back to balance. Well, let's not forget that the power of the Master's Defender, showcased in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep and Kingdom Hearts 3, that it has the ability to completely transform a world.
Generations of Keyblade Masters have been charged with keeping this land safe. Light and darkness exist in balance here, and there are those who would abuse such neutral ground. This is why our predecessors devised a certain trick.
Not only that, but it's also originally Brain's Keyblade. And why is that important? Well, the narrator, who we know is Sigurd, thanks to a secret message left by Tetsuya Nomura, had said this: "The night you awoke in this world, the stars shone contorted in the pitch black sky." What this tells me is that when Sigurd found Brain the night that he woke up in Scala, the light from the stars rained down abnormally in an otherwise pitch black sky. This is made even more clear when we break down the Japanese translation. Thanks to a viewer breaking down the vocab used, we can see that the verbiage beautifully and rain were used in the sentence before being translated, making the word contorted a lot less ominous. It should be noted that this person is still learning how to translate, so if anyone has any corrections, feel free to add it to the conversation. Back to the point of why this is important though. A seed of light has returned to the realm. The light of the worlds and the hearts of the people are reacting to that. Kingdom Hearts 1 showed us that worlds are stars in the night sky. We see that right after Destiny Island is swallowed by darkness.
You ever wonder what stars are? Where light comes from?
Well, they say
That every star up there is another world.
And Birth by Sleep utilizes a shooting star that Sora and Riku see as symbolism for Ventus's heart. But besides that, Xehanort did let us in on a little secret. Scala Ad Caelum is the nexus of all worlds, which would emphasize my theory of the worlds reacting to Brain's return. This is all to say that this era will be something truly special. With it out of sight of the Master's eye, it shows a blind spot in fate to be able to fight back and carve our own path. And who knows, maybe being out of sight is what the Master needed to be able to slip into unreality.
Besides, who's to say I can't change it? And maybe light will prevail.
I do have more evidence for my theory, but before we get into spoiler territory for Final Fantasy, I want to say thank you to everyone who made it to this point in the video. I made a Discord server named Somnia Harbor, and I'd love to have more people to bounce ideas off of. Kingdom Hearts is always on my mind, and these videos have been a great outlet for that. And if Discord isn't your thing, subscribe for more theories like this. Without further ado, let's talk about my discoveries within Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy 15. It may just inspire some theories out there. While playing Final Fantasy VI, it was interesting to me just how much I related the plot to Kingdom Hearts. The main character is from a different world full of magic, and is even given a safety charm. The same character that gives her that charm also relays the popular fairy tale of a black box being opened and unleashing evil on the purity of people. They describe the 5 sins: pride, envy, wrath, and gluttony, much like the 5 Latin Union leaders Ased, envy, ava, ira, and gula, with Lucio and superbia, the name on the box, rounding off the 6th and 7th deadly sins, pride being the only one that wasn't explicitly a Union leader. Terra is told that she is the last ray of hope, then proceeds to open the door to her world and unleashing espers into the world after being manipulated by an evil person. Sounds a lot like another Terra I know.
The darkness has nothing to fear.
Master Xehanort.
There's a ton of theories surrounding the box. I personally played around with the idea that the story of Kingdom Hearts took place in the black box, and that Xehanort was planted inside to train a strong heart to trap darkness, with Sora being the chosen one.
Make certain the box's contents match what's on the label. Since you have been chosen.
Much like in Final Fantasy 15, when Bahamut tells Arden that his purpose is to spread darkness. But in the same game that inspired that thought, Xehanort told Riku the organization has no use for someone who can trap darkness. So that idea got thrown out the window.
I don't know how you did it, but you really have found a way to trap darkness inside your heart. And a boy who's immune to darkness is of no use to us.
Speaking of Final Fantasy 15 though, this is where the World of Ruin idea really stuck down in my mind, and I started piecing things together. At first, I saw the chapter's name was World of Ruin. I just thought it was a neat callback to Final Fantasy VI, and it is. But as I explored Insomnia, I came across this fountain, and it looked very familiar. I went back and watched the Missing Link trailer and was shocked at the resemblance. It's not one for one, but it's very similar enough to get my gears turning. But then I thought back to when I was learning the language of Scala the week prior on stream, when a document made note of a typo on the chalkboard in the room where Ericus and Xehanort are playing chess. On that chalkboard it says Keyblade Wars, but there's a typo. The A in Wars is an O. So I got to thinking, what if that's an acronym for World of Ruin Scala? After all, King Triton said it best himself.
The key bearer shatters peace and brings ruin.
That said though, there is a lot that is not known about the Scala language, but knowing what I do now, I can notice subtle things like this pillar and the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer just casually having the numbers 7 and 13 on it. The unfortunate thing is that most of the letters used in the trailer are just not decipherable yet. But anyways, let me know what you think. I'm bound to have missed something in my analysis, so feel free to leave a comment. It's always great hearing back from you guys, and if you join the community by subscribing or joining the Discord, welcome to Somnia Harbor.